People don't talk about that enough. Not only sleep, hormonal cycle, but also diet. People don't talk about that enough. It's not just what creams you put on your face, it's what you put inside your body too. There's a difference between what you want and what you can have.
And what looks good on you. Okay.
That's a hot take. I don't get it. So we've been doing fillers for 30 plus years. Billions of people have been injected with fillers, and now all of a sudden they're bad.
Like, who's been the youngest candidate?
Ooh, like 24. Yeah.
24?
If you're vain enough to want this in your 30s, spoiler alert, I've seen this movie a million times. So you're gonna be doing small little things as you age.
What are some non-surgical things that you recommend that actually work? Because there's so much garbage on the market.
And here's a dirty little secret.
Hi guys, so welcome to another episode of Biohack-it. And today we're discussing one of my personal favorite topics, which is plastic surgery. And with the one and only Miguel Mascaro. I'm so excited to have you on because you are becoming the face guy in Miami. That's the word on the street.
It's a good word. It's a good word. I'll take that.
So I'm lucky that I got you in bright and early on a Saturday morning.
Well, you caught me because I was working as usual, right? So we were just joking around beforehand about like, oh my God, it's so early. Why are you here? Because I was seeing a patient. So my usual thing is if we do big surgery, then the next day we're going to go personally take care of you. So facelift yesterday, that means bright and early on a Saturday morning, go take a quick drive, take a look at the patient. Looks incredible, looks amazing. Perfect timing for a podcast afterwards.
It just worked out. And so we were talking about some things before we started filming, and I want to touch straight upon that. So for me, plastic surgery, it's an elective thing, right? You choose to do it. So you choose your surgeon, you choose the experience. And we were talking about something you said that it's the same as hospitality. So let's touch on that.
100%. I think the biggest thing that I try to harp on my staff, and I actually buy them books. I have them read stuff to kind of catch up on it, is if you think of what we do as medicine, you're going to fail. You need to treat people the way that you like to be treated as well. Yeah. This is an elective procedure. And even though for me, these big surgeries are just any other Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's a once in a lifetime experience for somebody else. And you need to respect it in that way. So something that I tell all my staff is you have to realize my wait line is about a year and a half for a consult. For surgery after that is another year. So that means that someone in theory waited between 2 and 2.5 years before they set foot in our office. So when they set foot in our office, everything needs to be perfect because it's the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
They have had this expectation for 2 to 2.5 years. They need to, every time you pick up the phone, every time you answer an email, every time when they come in, anything they need from before surgery, during surgery, and then even after surgery. We were just joking. I told my patient this morning, you have my cell phone, text me, call me, don't bother the nurses. I'm available because I'm your doctor. Yeah. And so I want that relationship to carry on, not just from before surgery, during surgery, after surgery, but even 3, 4, 5 years. I just got a text message from my first rhinoplasty from 8 years ago when I first got into private practice. She sent me her wedding pictures. And she's like,
so
I thought you'd really want to see these. Thank you so much. I love how I look.
So, I said, I was talking to somebody the other day and I said, body work is something you do maybe once or twice, but when you have a client, a patient for the face, they're a lifelong patient, right?
It's a totally different relationship.
It's a totally different relationship.
Totally different relationship. And so the relationship that I have with patient A is totally different than that one I have with patient B and patient C. And so much of it has to do with what our vision and our goals are going forward. Because not everybody wants to look like this person, or not everybody wants to look like that person. Not everybody can get those results either. So you need to be realistic about what your anatomy is, where you're going goals-wise, and what you can do to achieve it. And more often than not, for most people, less is more. Yeah. And one of the classic things that I talk about is, and this is one of my cheesy lines during my consults, is, there's 2 ways to get to a positive. You can either add positive attributes or you can subtract negative attributes. And for the vast majority of people, subtracting that negative
is the positive.
So there may be something that's detracting from your face. Most people are so focused on, for example, someone comes in their 50s and they're so concerned about their jowls. They're not that bad. That's the secret.
And if you address something else, it might just take the attention away. Yeah.
You just highlight, do a little brow lift, add a little fat grafting over the eyelid and a little bit underneath. Just really bring that attention back to the eyes. Stunning. That's all they needed.
While we're talking about it, we're talking about the fat grafting and all. What are some of, all the different things you're actually offering at your practice? Because I know you have 4 operating rooms, you have a few surgeons coming in. So what is I know your specialty, but for the guests over here, what is your key thing and what else is going on there?
So it's a very boutique practice. And so we specialize in just kind of providing the highest level of care, and everything we do has been peer tested and reviewed, meaning there's not going to be any experimental machines. There's not going to be any experimental injections. We don't deal with that nonsense. And so what you're getting is you're getting the best of the best. So there's myself, facial plastic surgeon. My partner is also a facial plastic surgeon. We have 1 body surgeon in my practice as well. We've got 2 injectors full time that are doing injections. I'll do injections as well for some of my patients. And then within that, we have, the latest and greatest lasers that have been proven to work. So that's really what we do.
Well, you took me into my next part of it. What are some non-surgical things that you recommend for people that actually work? Because there's so much garbage on the market. You're like, this 100%. Is the new laser. This is what's happening. What are things that are amazing for skin tightening, collagen stimulation, melasma, and dark spots?
So all those are very different and very interesting, because you need to understand kind of what your skin type is in order to understand what you can get out of it.
Okay.
Number 1. Number 2, genetics play a big role.
Yeah.
So oftentimes I'll tell my patients, it's not your fault, it's mom and dad's fault, right? So you have to remember that your genetics will come into play.
Yeah.
I have friends of mine that are in their 40s that look like they're 25, and I have friends of mine that are in their 40s that look like they're a little bit older than 40. And everybody has that dynamic and knows of people like that. And it's just the way it is. So you need to be aware of that as well, too. And number 3, we need to realize that these minimally invasive treatments are only going to respond.
Go so far.
Yeah, they're only going to go so far. So the more trauma, the more response you get. Think of it this way. The body and the skin, not very smart. So it can respond in 2 ways. If there's a lot of thermal injury, it can actually cause pigmentation, right, to try and protect itself.
Right.
Or if there's penetrating an injury, it'll create collagen and it'll create elastin to thicken itself. Those are the 2 main mechanisms. If we're going to simplify it for a 5-year-old, that's what it does. And so when you think of it that way, you can kind of understand what each thing will do. So for example, melasma, one of the hardest things to treat. So what happens? It's a dark spot. So how do we treat dark spots? With lasers that target that spots. I just told you thermal damage causes more darkness. In a patient who's prone to melasma, you hit them with a traditional laser,
It's going to get so much worse.
It's going to get worse. So it's a typical patient where it gets good for a little bit and then all of a sudden gets worse. Doctor comes back and says, oh my goodness, you had too much sun. You need to use these creams. In the back of your head, as a patient, you're saying, why wasn't I doing that beforehand if I'm going to need to do it afterwards? So there's 2 lasers that work very, very well for melasma. So lasers that fire very, very, very quickly. So there's not that much thermal injury or time for thermal injury. So a pico laser works very well, number 1, or a Q-switch laser. Incidentally, what are those lasers used for? Tattoo removal.
Right.
So lasers that target that dark pigment work very well. Now, you need to know what you're doing because it's finicky skin. It's very tricky. So not, the little fulanito that's down the street shooting their little pico laser or their Q-switch knows how to treat melasma skin. You need to find someone that's an expert at it. But the patients that find those practitioners do exceedingly well with them.
And do you need multiple?
Usually, and especially for something like melasma where genetically you're going to be making pigment, spoiler alert, it's not a one-time treatment. It's not a fix.
Right.
You'll need maintenance. And then yes, even though I just made fun of the idea of having to do creams as maintenance throughout, you still need to do that. You need to play defense. Even though we're playing some offense with the lasers, you need to play some
because your
defense.
body's daily producing that. And you live in Miami.
We live in Miami. So from the time that we walk from here to our cars, we're getting more UV exposure than most people for a month in Iowa.
Right.
So you have to be aware of that as well. So where you are location-wise plays a big part. So that's just from a laser standpoint. Now let's talk about the collagen. So collagen, how we do that? Well, thermal injury deep enough, as well as penetrating. Microneedling with radiofrequency works very, very well.
And that's tried and tested, right? It's been tested for so many years.
Tested
studied
forever. And so here's a little hack for most patients is if there's a lot of technologies out there, a lot of machines out there, and they all have the same basic technology behind it, that means it probably works.
Yeah.
The question then becomes, which is the best one? And there are different machines that are good for different things. There's no, unfortunately, magic wand of machine that's going to be incredible for everything. Radio frequency, tried and tested, works very well. A lot of thermal injury can either melt fat. So in some cases, we want to melt fat. Other cases, we don't. But it can stimulate collagen deposition, collagen creation, elastin formation. It can tighten skin. Sounds great, but it's not going to be this incredible non-surgical facelift. It's a minimal gain, you know? And again, this is one of those raindrops make oceans. So little gains over a large area can make a big improvement, but it's not going to be a facelift.
So I'm going to ask you something. What is your take, based on what you just said, on Morpheus8?
It works.
Yeah.
You know, it works, definitely. You need to be the right patient. And you need to pick the right setting for what you're doing. And so I think that, unfortunately, a lot of places buy these machines, then they have untrained practitioners using them, and they just say, you'd be a great candidate for Morpheus8, or you'd be a great candidate for Pixel8, or you'd be a great candidate for Infinity or Genius or whatever. All these machines that are great are Profound, which is even more aggressive than Morpheus. You'd be a great candidate for all these, when in reality, probably not. You know, certain aspects of what you're seeking, you'd be a good candidate for. So for example, with Morpheus, if you go very aggressively with a deep needle with a 4 millimeter penetration and you go super high on the power, you're going to lose volume. You're going to lose fat.
Right.
And in some patients, you may not want that. You know,
I'm one of those people. I definitely don't want to choose volume.
No. You don't want to lose any volume because you got a slender, slim face, right? And so any more definition is actually going to make you look older. In the micro, when you're taking a look, you're like, I love the contour you gave me here. Take a look back. Look at the mirror. You're looking at pictures afterwards. You're like, I don't get why I don't look as good as I did before. You lost volume.
Yeah.
So it's not that the machine was bad or that the machine had the problem. It's the person that did it used an inappropriate setting and was probably a little bit too aggressive. Now, the converse is also true, where it may be overpromise and underdeliver, where you've got fine lines and wrinkles and you're saying, I'm not ready for surgery, I'm not ready for this, and I'm seeing that it tightens. So if I do 4 or 5 sessions of this, I'm gonna be so nice and tight and it's gonna look amazing, gonna get rid of all the fine lines and wrinkles. You can get rid of about 15 to 20%.
Right.
And you have to realize 15 to 20% is not a lot. And then at least from my end, the way that I see it is, if I was spending X amount of dollars, what kind of result would I be happy with? Some people, and I have plenty of patients like this that are like, listen, I'll spend a fortune. I just don't want to go to sleep. I don't want surgery. And then there's other patients that'll say, I don't want to spend that much money, but I also want the world. And then you have to tell them, listen, you're going to spend so much money. It's not going to be, just save and do the right thing.
Right.
Just do the right thing. Do it once, do it right. Get it over with.
How young are people coming in, women or men? Are you seeing come in for facelifts? Like,
it varies by geography. And I hate to say this, but I would say my LA, New York, Texas patients and Middle East patients are probably the harshest on themselves. And I find that easily early to mid 30s, I'm already getting questions about jowling, necklines, laxity. And I don't see that as much from like my Miami patients or Chicago patients, which is interesting.
yeah.
That being said, I would tell you that probably late 20s is when we're starting to see people come in. And there's a big subset of that that is secondary to social media.
Right. Everyone's looking at pictures of themselves and they're comparing themselves to celebrities, not realizing it's a filter.
It's the worst. Even, I mean, you take a look and there's been such a rise in all these accounts where they will take the picture and then they'll have the Getty image that's unfiltered from the actual PR. And you put them side by side and beautiful, both of them stunning, but there's a little bit of a difference. And people focus on that one. And they're like, I want to look like that person. And so many times I've been fortunate enough to be in a position where I treat a lot of these people. And I'll tell them, listen, I'm going to be honest with you, between you, me, and the fence post, they don't look like that. Like you don't need to worry about that. Yeah. Like, listen, nobody looks like that.
Yeah.
Like, not only that, they also have full-time stylist, full-time makeup artist, and they're they're at a gala.
Yeah.
Of course they're going to look incredible.
Yeah.
Like you're being very harsh on yourself. And not only that, but then they also compare it to themselves. And think about it because you're around my age. So 15, 20 years ago, how often did we see pictures of ourselves? couple weeks, maybe. That was like at the advent of Facebook.
Now it's daily.
Now it's daily. Now it's hourly. You're taking stories. You're taking pictures. You go out with your friends. You see what you look like last night. You see what you look like the week before. You're like, man, I looked really good a week before. What happened in this week? My lips are going down. My lips are going up. What's happening? So there is not only pressure from the outside, but also that internal pressure where you're like, man, I'm seeing changes in myself on a daily basis. What can I do to stop it?
With women, I think we also have like 4 hormone cycles a month. So it can vary, right? Some days we're a little bit more bloated and swollen. Some days we're not. For us, a little bit of sleep can affect us so differently than it does men. Our biology is completely different.
People don't talk about that enough. Not only sleep, hormonal cycle, because I talk about that a lot, particularly with my 46 to 55-year-old patients when we're prepping them for a facelift, and we can dive into that later on, but also diet. People don't talk about that enough, where if you're sensitive to a particular set of foods, and a lot of people don't know what they are sensitive to. A lot of people don't know, like, man, I felt really bad today. And like, it's not because you didn't have enough sleep. It's not because you didn't drink enough water. It's because you had some crap last night that you didn't realize doesn't sit well with your gut and your natural flora. And this is just something that's developed over the last 20, 30 years or so. And now you're having that reaction, and your skin is letting you know, your body lets you know, and you feeling bloated, you looking a little funky, you looking a little weird is your body's way of letting you know, guys, what are we doing? What is this happening here?
So what a big role does diet and healthy lifestyle play in how you age? I mean, for people listening, having seed oils, not having seed oils, taking care, even not just because you're coming in for surgery, but in life in general.
It's huge. I mean, it's so much. Like, honestly, it's 90% of our life is what you put into it.
Right.
If you got a nice car and you're putting in the cheapest gas that you can get at the cheapest gas station, guess what? That engine's not going to work really well. You get a Lambo and you're putting in like base level petrol, it's not going to work well. You're not going to get all 600 or 700 horsepower out of it. That's just not how it works. Your body's the same thing. Your body takes in fuel and then it turns that into everything that your body needs. And that's not just your energy. It's also in how you develop collagen, how you respond to some of this trauma that we talked earlier, the thermal injury, the penetrating injury, how your skin reacts, how you age. So all this plays a big, big part. It's not just what creams you put on your face.
Right.
Obviously that helps. Moisturizer,
it's what you
SPF,
put inside your body.
but it's what you put inside your body
Right.
too. And a lot of people don't think about it.
I think, and I say this a lot on my podcast, you have to look at the water you're drinking.
100%.
How hydrated are you? Are you getting in enough minerals? Your quality of sleep.
You're talking to the biggest water snob.
What's your favorite water? I want to know.
I pick out like water based on TDS like all the time. So like at my office, I make sure that like our water is like, we have 2. So we have sparkling, obviously, because we're bougie. And then we also have spring water. So no purified water. It has to be natural spring water with a certain TDS over 40. Otherwise, why are we serving it? Because it's not hydrating you. It's just going through you. And in some cases, it can dehydrate you because it's going to pull the nutrients out. And you're going to be going to the bathroom and you're going to be peeing all day.
Right.
But it's not doing what it's supposed to.
That's a sign of an amazing doctor who takes care of his patients, guys. So if you're listening, this is so important.
It's the details.
It's the details. So I'll tell you something. I went to New Jersey to see a very famous functional medicine doctor. I was waiting 3 months to get in with her. I finally got in with her. I go to her office. Her team brings me Mountain Valley. And all the snacks are gluten-free, clean ingredients, because I was doing a bunch of blood work, and they're like, we don't want you to faint. And I was like, I have never been to a doctor's office that took such good care of being like, here's a top quality water, no plastic, only glass, here are clean snacks. And I was like, it's the details. This is the kind of person I want to put my health in their hands because they really care about what's going on.
It makes a big difference. It makes a big, big difference.
And I'm so happy to hear you say that because a lot of people don't take care of these little details. They're giving you water in plastic bottles. I'm like, microplastics are so bad for you. Our bodies are full of them these days. I don't need more plastic going into my body.
No. Well, what's interesting, and this is a funny story, is just to give you guys a little behind the scenes of operations work. So we recently were redoing our snacks. And so we've always had healthy snacks. Come down from the operating room, swing down, and out of corner of my eye, I'm walking down and I come down the stairs and I see in our little waiting area for surgeries, we have like a nice Nespresso, and then we have a fridge down below with, you know, waters and juices, etc. And I see the snacks it just looks really full. And I'm like, it's usually not that full. What's going on?
What's going on? Yeah.
So I walk over and I see Oreos and all this stuff. And immediately I'm like, no, I took a picture of it. I went to my partner and I was like, this
is not allowed.
Is not going to happen.
Sugar.
I was like, this
is
not,
people.
I was like, this is not going to happen. I was like, this is not right. Like, this has to go. And that's it. Like, we got rid of it because you need to be aware about
inflammation.
Exactly. Inflammation, all these things. But also, if someone's coming into a plastic surgery office to look better, and then you sit down and there's bleeping Oreos in the waiting room.
Yeah.
Like, what are you
doing? That's
No.
not on brand for, well, you want them to age well. That goes against aging well, essentially.
Yeah. Listen, if I hadn't, you know, my 5-year-old daughter loves the fact that there were Oreos there, but, you know, I don't want anybody else to go in there and have this exposed to them.
Obviously, you all know I'm a biohacking fanatic and I absolutely love peptides. So you can only understand how excited I was when I discovered a skincare brand that works, that uses peptides. That is OneSkin. OneSkin uses the amazing OS1 peptide. OS1 works by actually switching off the senescent cells that drive the aging of your skin. Scientifically proven to give you biologically younger skin with long-lasting improvements in firmness, elasticity, reduction of fine lines and wrinkles, and a more youthful complexion. You can learn more about the OS1 peptide at oneskin.co and use my code Biohack-it for 15% off your purchase. I want to talk a little bit about supplements, right? Because there's a lot of noise around this as well. Like, they take this supplement, take that supplement. So one thing is people take a lot of collagen. And research has obviously shown, and I talk about this, that collagen by itself, you're just peeing it away, right? So I want to hear from an expert.
Expensive pee and poop. I tell every single person that tells me that, oh, when can I restart taking my collagen? I'm like, why are you doing that? How much money are you wasting on that?
Right.
You're going to pee and poop it out. Why? Because there's no mechanism for you to actually absorb that collagen. And even when you absorb it, it's also hotly debated as to whether or not that has any effect. But I can tell you this, if you don't absorb it, there's zero effect. So if you take it on its own, you don't. Now you can take it with zinc. That certainly does help a little bit of the absorption. There's
Vitamin
others.
C.
Yeah, vitamin C helps as well. But you need to be aware that even in those cases, the studies don't really show how much you can do. And it's also very difficult to generalize. Hey, if you take X amount of teaspoons of this, it's going to give you a Y percentage improvement or increase in that. It's hard to quantify. Just think about it from that standpoint. How are you going to test that? Because everybody's different. Everybody's biology is different. Everybody's genetics are different. Some people are going to respond much better than others. Some people don't need it. And I'll be honest with you, the people that don't need it are the ones that swear by it and take it the most. The people that definitely need it are the ones that aren't taking care of themselves.
Exactly.
They don't take care of themselves.
This is why I always say I think functional labs are so important versus traditional labs, because the ranges are so much tighter. They're checking for more things and they're really like being like, hey, you need this, you don't need this, don't over supplement over here, your body's just going to pee it out.
Not only that, but an important thing to know about ranges in labs is, for the audience out there doesn't realize this, is when we send out lab work to Quest, for example, the range that they determine as normal is based on the population around you. So you need to be aware of why that's so important. Because even though a lot of times we talk about tight ranges, it's not just a tight range for you, not a tight range for the population.
And it also depends on your ethnic background,
100%.
where you grew up, what your, kind of like lifestyle choices are, and that can affect so much of what shows up in your lab work.
Yeah, 100%. What you do in your daily living is going to affect you dramatically in everything you do.
And I think we don't talk about enough about, like, you obviously touched upon genetics, but also ethnic backgrounds make a big, big, big difference in how your lab work is going to reflect, and then how you start taking care of yourself, which is why I wish people who can afford it, right? Because obviously it is expensive. It's not covered by insurance. If you can afford it and you have the money, you have, in my mind, you have no excuse to why you're not investing in getting to know your body better.
You should. And it doesn't make sense to me that people will spend a fortune on a pair of sneakers or on a shirt
or dinner,
or a jacket or dinner. And then all of a sudden, when it comes down to them, when's the last time you went to the doctor? 2 years ago. Okay. Yeah, I go to the gym every day.
Nothing happened. That's
I go to the gym every day. I'm healthy. I do this. I do that. Like, okay. That's great. How's your family? My dad had a heart attack when he was 50. I'm like, okay. How's your mom? History, dementia, diabetes in the family.
Exactly,
I'm like,
right.
okay.
And you're like, it hasn't registered that you should maybe go check and take a deeper dive.
Just take a deeper dive.
But I feel good. And it's like, but it's not how you feel, because things can be going on the inside that are burning up that you're not paying attention to.
And then it's a precipitous downfall. And everybody, it's enough stories that it's not just anecdotal, right? It's different if we've heard of this one time where this one person was doing perfectly fine, then all of a sudden they woke up and bam, something terrible happened. But the truth is that we all have enough experience and we all know enough of these stories where it might not be a bad idea. And then you also need to have a little bit of insight. And I think this is the hardest part, is it's very easy for us as people to dissociate from that and say, you should get checked out. You have a family history of this. You have blah, blah, blah. So it's very easy to do the yous. Having that insight and then turning it around and saying, man, my dad had this. Like, man, my grandpa did this. Never met my grandma. You know, wow, like so-and-so, this is happening. You need to also take active part. You are your best advocate.
Right.
You know, like you are your own advocate at some point, and you need to be aware of that.
And I think people don't want to, sometimes people just avoid it. I've had people in my family gotten diagnosed with cancer and whatever, and just have an avoidant personality because people almost don't want to deal with what's going on. But if you got ahead of the problem, then hopefully the bad news doesn't have to be that bad.
Yeah, no,
right?
And it makes life easier. You know, it's always, and you don't want to take this turn, but you know, in my training, when I was doing a lot of head and neck cancer reconstructions, you always talk about like, if you can nick something at like a stage 1, you get it. Why? Because the stage 1 is curable. That's a surgical disease that you cut it out and it's done. You're good, you're cured. Whereas if you just let it sit and fester, things get bad. Perfect example, pancreatic cancer. The reason pancreatic cancer is so deadly is because you don't find it until it's too late. It's asymptomatic.
Right.
And then by the time you have symptoms, guess what? It's stage 4, spread, and you've got, you know, a couple months. Like, it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Now, that doesn't mean that everybody needs to go out and get amylase lipase labs every couple of years and, you know, get scans and ultrasounds and, you know, check their pancreas. But you don't need to be that extreme either. You just need to be mindful about yourself, and, you know, you want to kind of treat your body and give it respect. And so taking care of the inside is just as important as taking care of the outside. And even though I know, like, I make a living taking care of the outside, I do try and impart that on my patients.
Yeah, and encourage them to make sure they're both in balance. And that's what you want from somebody, right? You want somebody who's invested on the internal health of a patient as well, because not only because of the results that they will get, but just because it's a reflection
Absolutely
of your practice.
No, it's a reflection of the relationship. You know, often we compare it to dating. You know, I say, like, you know, my patients, or when my patients pick me, I pick my patients too. You know, I'm in the fortunate scenario where, you know, got crazy weight and I don't need more patients. Like, often with my coordinator, with Lauren, we joke about closing the kitchen. You know, like, maybe we should just close the kitchen for a year just to kind of like balance things out. But to me, is you pick people. And the biggest concern is when people become my patients, they're like, oh, I just don't want to keep waiting for this. I'm like, you're in the club. Like, now you just text me and we get, this is why the wait is long.
That's why you build those relationships up. Have you said no to people? Have you met somebody in a consult and be like, I don't want to operate on this person?
All day.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I do consults Mondays and every other Friday.
Okay.
And I would tell you that probably 2 out of 5 consults I say no to, or I point them in a different direction.
Okay.
The pointing in the different direction is easy because oftentimes patients come in with an idea of what it is that they want. And this may be misguided. They may be on the right track. They're just kind of going about it the wrong way. And so then I give them my viewpoint, kind of point things out to them. And that often is a very productive conversation. The ones that are difficult are the ones that come in and say, I want to look like X or I want Y result. And you're looking at them and saying, it's just not realistic.
That's not going to happen.
I'm worried about your motivation behind why you want to
look
do
like
that.
this.
And here's a dirty little secret. So when I start a consult, I often, first thing we'll do is I'll start trying to find out about you. So I'll try and connect with you. And the reason I'm connecting with you is twofold. Number one is I want to see if we have a good vibe.
Yeah.
And, we'll be joking, we'll be talking, and it'll be like 5-10 minutes of just joking around. Even though we're doing that, at the same time, I'm also studying your face. I'm seeing how you smile, laugh, move, what areas, asymmetries, all these things. So after we're joking for like 2-3 minutes, even though we're joking, you'll see me start taking some notes. And I have a drawing of a face, and I'm starting to mark different things. You sketched the
face out?
So we're starting to mark stuff out.
That's amazing.
So as we're doing that, I'm figuring out exactly what it is
that you don't like about yourself.
You may not like about yourself.
Okay.
And then at that point, once I've gotten, enough information, about 5-10 minutes, then I'll say, so listen, how can I help you?
Talk to me. Yeah.
What's going on? And then they'll start pointing stuff out. And I have like a general order of things that I like to address in order to maximize the benefit from an aging standpoint. And most of the time people are dead on. Perfect example. I had a patient, I just did her surgery on Wednesday. It was Wednesday. And she comes in. She flew in from Louisiana. She's from New Orleans. Beautiful lady. We did upper eyelids, lip, corner lift. She's sitting in front of me and she's talking to me. She wants to do a facelift next. She goes, Miguel, I want to do a facelift next. And I'm looking at her and I say, you got to do your lower lids. And she goes, what do you mean? And I was like, you're going to spend a fortune to do your facelift, and you're going to look in the mirror afterwards and you're going to say,
I don't like this.
Something is missing. Yeah. What is off? And if you just did your lower lids, you're going to save yourself a fortune, and it's going to take you that much further because your jawline's not bad, your neck's not bad. Yes, I'm starting to see those changes, but this is going to carry you much further. So I saw her Tuesday because she had flown in. We did our in-person. That afternoon, she calls and she says, hey, listen, can we do the lowers too? I'm like, oh, man, let me see if I can squeeze it in. We extended surgical time, was able to squeeze it in. I saw her the following day for follow-up afterwards. And she looks at me and she goes, you were spot on.
Yeah.
Even though she's swollen, she's puffy, there's laser, there's like,
But it's like gut check that you're like, I got this guy nailed it for me.
Yeah, it's like, it's just perfect. And so that's a perfect example where you just redirect someone. There's other cases where someone is very persistent about something and they're like, this is what's bothering me. And when we talked, at no point did that jump out at me as a negative attribute that we should address. And what concerns me with that is that they're so focused on the micro that there may be a particular reason why they're so focused on the micro. And that has to do more with mental trauma. Mm-hmm. And then at that point,
you don't want to get into that space.
Surgery
it's not going to
fix that.
Yeah.
I can objectively fix something that we both agree is wrong. But if subjectively there's a different reason why you wanted to have that fixed, it's not going to work. I do more lip work than just about anybody in the world. So if someone comes to me and they're saying my lips are off, the contour's off, I need this, I need that, fine, no problem, I can do that. They tell me when I smile, the right side of my lip doesn't come up as much. I just started noticing this over the last 2-3 years. Okay. What happened? I have all these pictures from my wedding. I'm like, oh, tell me about your wedding. This like, I was divorced 3 years ago. I don't want to talk about it. It was like, oh, so 3 years ago you started noticing it. You were divorced 3 years ago. And this is what's it's like, I just want my old smile back. I'm like, and then I have to have this serious conversation of, I can't get you your old smile back. There's changes that happen with the muscles as we age. I was like, I can get you close, but I can't get you there. Now we need to have the discussion as to whether when I get you there, that's going to make you happy or not. And my gut tells me it's probably not. And at the end of the day, you're going to be spending a lot of money to have this procedure for a very minor change.
They're not even going to maybe be happy with.
The juice is not worth the squeeze whatsoever, on this.
And that brings me to, what are some of your favorite procedures that you're doing? What are you doing? A, what are you doing the most of? And B, what is your favorite?
So the most of is, like I said, it's a biased number. Just like I do more lips than just about anybody in the world.
I mean, you're famous for that. People literally come up to me and they're like, oh, do you know Miguel? I'm trying to get in to do my lip.
Yeah, exactly.
And I'm like, okay.
It's nuts. Like that's a nutty
What
number.
exactly is a lip lift?
So what we're doing is, historically what a lip lift did is it restructured the proportion of the face of the lower third. So if you take a look, oftentimes people think of it as a newer procedure, but in reality, it's been described for the last 30, 40 years. It's just the techniques change. So we were doing it 30, 40 years ago, looked like crap. So swung the other way and said, we're not doing this. And then they realized, nope, there's got to be a better way, because that really made a difference. And then now slowly we're getting to the point where we're getting really good results and techniques from it. So just like anything else, pendulum swings in either direction. What it does is it restricts that proportion, because as we age, guess what happens? Your brows fall, your eyes fall, your boobs fall, your butt falls, your tummy falls.
Yeah, gravity.
The lip falls too. And you have to think of it as a curtain, right? So your upper lip is literally a hanging meat curtain off the skeleton. So particularly with the advent of fillers, you're adding weight to it, it's going to drop. And if you think of grandma 30, 40 years ago, when, you know, she was in her 60s and 70s, she had this really long lip. She didn't always have that really long lip. And as we've been taking more and more pictures and there's more documentation, what we're seeing is that the youthful mouth has a little bit of tooth show. There's a nice short proportion where there's a third up top and 2/3 down below. And obviously these are rough approximations, and facial skeleton plays a big part. Ethnicity makes a huge part in it. But by shortening that, even though we're not addressing the facial skeleton behind it, we can give the illusion of a heart shape by making the space shorter. So if you can imagine someone that's got a really long lower third, if we make it look like it's shorter, all of a sudden we're making it look like the faces are shorter, and we're making it look like it's a little more heart shaped. So it gives that beautiful illusion of youth. So that's just the thought process behind a lip lift. Now let's take it to the next level. Let's go graduate level. So if that's just your college level, graduate level, we can change the shape and what parts of the lip we want different things to do. So we want a little more Cupid's bow. Within reason, we can change the incision in a certain way to create more Cupid's bow. We want a little bit more of a flip versus a little bit more flare. Depends on how we angle, how we pick it up, where we release. Do we want the corners of the mouth to slightly come upward? Do we want them to flare? Do we want a medialized corner lift? Do we want to do a full extended corner lift? So depending on what you want to do, you can address different areas. And it's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And so we can get you pretty close to what you want to be. And then there's a difference between what you want and what you can have.
And what looks good on you.
And what looks good on you. So there's 3 totally different doors. It's like we're playing a game show. And oftentimes when patients come in and sit down in front of me, you know, I'll give them the options. And there's times when I'll say, listen, I like this, but we have a choice between these 2 options, and the change is so minimal. I mean, we're talking about a millimeter change. And the patient will often say, I don't really see a difference. I was like, I know you don't see a difference, but I'm seeing the difference. So let me show you again.
Yeah.
And if there's a choice between the 2, as a third-party observer, I think this looks better to fit your face. But oftentimes patients choose another way. I mean, there's many times where I will suggest something and someone will pick something completely different. And that's okay with me, because I think of it almost
their
like
face
it's your face and it's your style, it's your personality. It's like going to Neiman, going to buy a jacket. And if you came to me and you're like, Miguel, go get that motorcycle jacket. I'm like, I look like an idiot in a motorcycle jacket. I put it on. You say, Miguel, you look amazing in that motorcycle jacket.
You don't feel good in it. Yeah.
But I'm looking in the mirror and I'm saying, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
I don't. I feel much more comfortable in the fuzzy jacket. And you're like, that looks stupid. I'm like, but I like it.
Yeah.
So there is a little bit of that. So lips, obviously, just to get back to it, probably the most common thing that I do. But again, it's a biased number. Now, the thing that I'm doing most of depends on the age.
Okay.
And so that kind of harps in a little bit with like, what's my favorite? So I think that for the young patient, in the right person, a brow lift, lip lift, maybe a little life-changing. Life-changing. Like legitimate time machine. It's incredible. So someone in their mid-30s that needs that, time machine picks them up, makes them look incredible.
That's another thing, right? People think you should get a brow lift later in life, but it's normally the first thing you'd probably do when people get into that kind of aging.
And as long as you need it. And that's the thing. There's some people that don't need it. Some people do need it.
Yeah.
And when you're addressing the brows, you also have to think about the whole area of the eyes, because what we're looking at is really not just the brows, we're looking at the eyes. And the biggest mistake that people can do is do a brow lift in someone with a deep set eye, because it'll actually make them look even more deep set.
Okay.
So oftentimes you need a little bit of volume as well in that upper eye, just to contour a little nano fat.
Right.
And then that smooths out that area. Because remember, I'm just a hairstylist with like fancy little instruments. That's all I do.
That's a good way.
That's all I do. So I have to think about lights and shadows.
Right.
All I think about is lights and shadows. So if you've got deep set eyes, you've got a deep shadow. If we pick up the brow, we're going to create a highlight at the brow bone,
Right.
which is then going to make the shadow underneath the brow bone look that much darker. So even though the brows are in good position, you're going to say, man, I look older. I'm putting more eyeshadow. It just looks darker in there. It doesn't look great. It looks good at night, but during the day, I just look tired. It looks bad. So how do we soften that shadow? We fill it with volume to pick that area up. And then when you look at pictures of yourself, there's a big confusion between volume and hooding. And oftentimes people think like, oh, I don't want hooding. I don't want hooding. It's not about hooding. It's about softening that contour. And when
so
you
the
soften
effect.
Exactly. When you soften that effect and you soften that contour, things blend really nicely, things blend really smoothly, and now all of a sudden it's a lot more youthful. That being said, the brows need to come up. In some cases, I have young patients where they need an upper blepharoplasty, so they actually need the excess skin removed as opposed to having their brows brought up. However, in most cases, I always tell them, if you need to have your brows brought up, always do that first, because otherwise, if you take too much of the skin, one, it's going to pull the brows down, and two, you won't be able to pick those brows up as much as you want because you won't be able to close your eyes.
You know, that's amazing that you just said that, because I've seen, and a bunch of people have told me, sometimes a brow lift can make so much of a difference that you don't need an upper bluff.
Correct.
Because people are like so focused on the upper bluff. I'm like, why don't you consider maybe a brow lift?
Because the upper bluff has been, I mean, it's got great PR agency. And what ends up happening is people think of it as an outpatient procedure done under local anesthesia. All of those things are correct. What is a brow lift? It's outpatient, but it's not done under local anesthesia, and the recovery is much harder and much worse. So you already have that internal struggle of, that's a bigger surgery. The other thing is almost like I'm going and getting a mole removed. I'm walking around fine. So you have that built into the psyche of which one you're picking. And so it just needs better PR.
Listen, you did one of my best friend's brow lifts recently, and she looks phenomenal, and her recovery was really not bad.
It's not bad.
And she looks amazing.
It's not bad. I mean, it's one of those things where you tell the patient it's going to be a bad headache for 2-3 days.
For her,
Bruising,
it even wasn't that. It was like 24 hours, 48 hours, and
sometimes you bruise, sometimes you don't, but that's surgery. That happens with an upper blepharoplasty too. I have patients with upper blepharoplasty. It looks like nothing happened. Then I have other patients that look like they got hit by a 2x4. Why? Who knows? Genetics play a big part into this as well.
inflammation in the body,
Inflammation in the body.
how much filler
all
you
these
have in
things.
your face.
Yes. So
We're going to
all
get
stuff
into
comes in.
that too. We wouldn't have a podcast talking about optimizing women's health without talking about BodyBio. I use BodyBio every single day, and their hero product is a necessity for everyone in my house. PC is a pure liposomal phospholipid complex that helps protect the 70 trillion cells in our body from aging, environmental stressors, and toxin exposure. This little guy is great for everyone, you, your husband, your kids, and even your pets. Our health truly starts with ourselves, and PC gives them the support and maintenance they need. To learn more about BodyBio, head over to their website, www.bodybio.com, and use the code Biohack-it for 20% off your first order. And if you've already purchased BodyBio and want to rebuy, use Iman at checkout for 15% off all your orders. Who, like age-wise, what is the youngest you've ever done a brow lift on? Like, who's been the youngest candidate?
Ooh, like 24. Yeah.
24?
Yeah. She was super young.
But what was it, genetics, or was it her?
It was genetic.
Okay.
It was genetic. And
24,
it was
huh?
and it was
Okay.
actually, it was interesting. It was someone who had a history of just dramatic weight loss. So
Okay, that
they
makes
had
sense.
a ton of excess skin. They really wanted a facelift, but their laxity wasn't quite there yet. And so even though they had 150-pound weight loss, which is pretty dramatic,
Yeah.
and they had excess skin, they had done a lot of the skin removal for their body, their face just wasn't quite there yet, and they're young enough where they get a great response from minimally invasive.
Wow.
So we did some radio frequencies, did incredible. But her upper third, it's like it melted down. And when you're feeling the brow bone and the brow ridge, your brows should be at the very least at the ridge, if not a little bit above it, particularly
Yeah.
the tail. She was below it. And so it was a no-brainer. You know, it was, listen, we got to do this. I know you're worried about the hooding, but
That's not your problem.
forget the hooding. You know, if I pull the hooding, this is still going to feel heavy. You're still going to feel like there's this big, heavy weight on top. We got to pick that up. So we did that. So that's an extreme case. Now, on the average cosmetic, I would tell you probably youngest 30, like early 30s, like 31, 32.
And facelift?
Youngest 32. Like a primary facelift, 32. Revision, I've done, yeah, same, like 31, 32.
And
genetic, big time. That's all genetic.
Do people have to get more than one facelift over the course of their life?
Depends on how vain you are. Nobody needs it, right? And so what I tell my young patients is, if you're vain enough to want this in your 30s, spoiler alert, I've seen this movie a million times. You're probably going to be pickier and more vain than most. So you're going to be doing small little things as you age. Now, conveyor belt of time keeps moving. Aging process continues. You are always better off than if you did nothing at all. You just have to remember that so that you don't get caught up in that hamster wheel.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden you're like,
Constant.
It's been 4 years. I'm starting to see a little bit of laxity. I need to get that fixed. Like, yeah, as you get older and as the hormones change, the composition of collagen and elasticity changes. The conveyor belt of time starts moving a little bit faster as we get older. So even though we've picked you up, we may need to pick you up again. You just have to be careful with doing it too soon.
Right.
Now, if we're going to generalize, how long before you're kind of back to where you started or back to needing something? Maybe between 7 and 12 years.
Right.
So
if it's done well.
Yeah. So historically, and actually, even when you take a look at it, a lot of the data, when they're looking at large numbers of people, there's not much difference between a good SMAS lift, a good deep plane facelift, a good, high SMAS, low SMAS, plication, imbrication. But that's done over a large number of cases. So, oftentimes people harp a little bit on that technique and whatnot. This is one of those where I tell patients, it more than anything matters the style of what you're going for and who you go to. And we can talk about that in a little bit. But you have to be aware that, you'll get 7 to 12 years. So historically, people were doing their facelifts in their 50s. There's a big article that came out about 15, 20 years ago looking at the trends, and it was 54. That was when women started to do these procedures. That was 20 years ago. So if you're 55, last you till your mid 60s, then you do another one, you're good. So most people would say like, do one, maybe two,
right,
and I'll be fine. Now we're moving that that goalpost a little bit. So now people are doing it in their 40s. Like, it's very common to have someone in their mid 40s do a facelift. Okay, so if you do it in your mid 40s, guess what happens in your early 50s? Menopause. So what's going to happen?
Everything's going to start dropping.
It doesn't matter if you do it before or after. And that's part of the counseling that I was telling you about earlier with my patients who come in for consult in their late 40s. We always talk about hormones. But if you do it in your 40s, guess what? It's going to drop. So then you're going to do it again in your early 50s. If you're doing it in your early 50s because you looked really good in your 40s and you looked like you were 30, and now all of a sudden it rapidly accelerated as the hormones kind of started changing, and then you want to nip it in the bud again to kind of go back, try and get that same effect, get that instant gratification, you're going to do it again in early 50s. Changes in hormones are going to continue to go over your mid 50s as things settle down. Then guess what? Late 50s, you're going to say, okay, I'm starting to see some of the laxity, bone's starting to resorb a little bit. I don't want to wait till the bone resorbs too much because then all of a sudden we're redraping over a different frame. So I'm gonna do it again. Now you're 3 facelifts in. Then you've done 3 of them and you're like, it wasn't that bad. I'm all in.
3 facelifts?
Then mid 60s, you're like, oh, let's do it all over again. And so it's very quick and easy to kind of get caught up in that. So you need to be aware of it, because particularly with modern techniques and how we take care of patients and how we do things, it's an inconvenience for 10 days. Think about how many things you've done that inconvenience you for 10 days. A sprained ankle is an inconvenience for 3 weeks. So it's really not that bad, but you need to be aware.
And I can't believe somebody's, you've seen people who've done like 2-3 facelifts in like less than under 70 is wild to me.
And it's
a lot of trauma.
It's a lot of trauma, but some people need it, and depending on what their goals are. And again, this is where the genetics of the tissue come into play. So if for whatever reason, mom and dad just did not have the best genetics and you have a little bit more laxity and elasticity, you're going to get a little bit more than the average bear, and then you need to pick it up. And then let's say that you had great results and you loved how you look, because honestly, like my patients that are in their late 30s, early 40s that are doing little mini lifts and brow lifts, it's time machine. You're picking them up. They wake up, they look 27, 28, 29. Yeah. I get it. Like I see it every day and I'm like, I get why you get hooked on this. Okay, it's cool. No problem. But then as it ages and then they get a little bit older, they're the first ones to come back and say, hey, can we do my lids next? Or what do you think about doing this little tweak? And I have to tell them,
no,
the skin's not ready.
Yeah.
You need to make sure the tissue is ready to do a little bit more.
What is your technique for facelifts? Because people talk about all these like fancy names and things, like some do SMAS, there's a vertical restore, there's so much stuff out there, right? So what is your technique?
So
Or do you mix it?
Mix it up. So the interesting thing about surgical techniques and my take on this, and I talk about this with a couple friends of mine, particularly actually a good friend of yours as well, with Ryan Neinstein, is you can't trademark techniques. It would be like trademarking kidney transplants, trademarking hip replacements. It's unethical. It's impossible. But you can trademark a name. And that's no difference than trademarking the Birkin name.
Yeah.
Right? So you could go get another purse that looks just like a Birkin, made at the same atelier in France. But if it's not, made by Hermes, and it just happens to be made by one of the guys who worked at the atelier and then he went on his own, it's not an Hermes. And so you need to be aware of that oftentimes people harp so much on the name of a technique when in reality it's just how one person describes what they do. Now, the technique that I do is an extended deep plane facelift, and it's always evolving. Not everybody gets an extended deep plane facelift because a straightforward, by the book definition, extended deep plane facelift is what's called a composite flap, meaning the skin and the muscle get lifted together in the same direction. Oftentimes the skin needs to be redraped in a different direction than the muscle. So what I do is I'll do an extended deep plane facelift, meaning we separate the cheek retaining ligaments down to the mandible and then extend that all the way down into the platysma. So we're lifting all that muscle and putting it back to where it was in your 20s and 30s. And then we separate the skin and do a separate flap to redrape that skin in a different direction. And that's what's called a biplanar modification or a biplanar lift. That's what's done on the sides. In the middle, I like to do a platysmoplasty. I like to do a central compartment neck dissection. So it's a deep neck dissection where we open up the platysma. If you're imagining it like a jacket, those two bands, you're opening those up like a jacket, cleaning out the area underneath of all the fat. So you really see the deep laryngeal work and structures all the deep lying muscles of the neck. Take a look at the glands. So the glands that are hanging down out here, as we get older, oftentimes they drop. So what we do is we remove about 2/3 of them on both sides to really get that nice smooth contour.
Right.
And then we redrape that in. Oftentimes, if the voice box has to come up and back, we do what's called laryngeal setback. So we trim some of those muscles to pick that up and angle it back to get you a little bit closer to that swan neck that everybody really loves. And then we bring that platysma back together after we trim the bellies. So there's a lot of deep neck work that's done from the inner corner from a 2-finger breadth incision under the chin.
And your incisions are really famous. They're really crisp. That's how
Very
everybody
crispy.
describes them, very crispy. How did you perfect that?
It's funny. The best compliment I got, I did some work for this girl who's editor for a big magazine in New York, and she was writing about her experience, and she said getting an incision from Miguel is like getting a tattoo at Bang Bang. And anybody that knows anything about tattoos, I have no tattoos. I just really appreciate the artwork that goes into it. Bang Bang is known as the spot in New York where only the best tattoo artists work and get the nicest line work. So I was like, that is the coolest thing that anybody's ever said.
Yeah.
But it's practice. It's like anything else, right? 10,000 hours. So I remember from the time that I was a medical student, I would be suturing up my couch. I would be suturing up pants. I'd be suturing up everything just because I wanted to make sure that it's as good as humanly possible. So I would have things everywhere, just constantly sutured to the point where I don't have to think about it. And my goal was always to make it look like it was so perfect that a machine did it. And it has to be perfect. The skin is perfect. The edges are perfect. The spacing between the sutures are perfect. The tension between the sutures are perfect. And it takes time. I mean, it was just nonstop doing it. And when I got into practice, I knew that it was going to be very hard to differentiate myself, particularly one, being in South Florida. Two, I look much younger than I am.
Yep.
I mean, like, you're catching me now.
Let's give it away.
Yeah,
Miguel, how old are
I'm
you?
40. But I started when I was 32, right? So imagine going to a 32-year-old surgeon, right? And like, and now I have like scruff with like white on it, but I also just bleached my hair. So
It looks good though.
I like it. You got to switch it up.
Yeah, you got to have fun.
You got to switch it up.
Don't be so stiff.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I was young, and how do you differentiate yourself? Because you're not going to get a big facelift. You're not going to get these big surgeries when you're 32, you look like a baby.
Right.
It's not going to happen. But I knew, I was like, I can suture better than anybody else. I've shadowed everybody. I followed everybody. I did my time. I literally stalked everybody. And when it came down to it, I was like, I know I can suture better than anybody else on this fucking planet. So I started focusing on that. And when I started doing that, I started seeing the pickup on that. And when you see particularly how I started to promote myself with my Instagram and, online on other platforms, it was up close shots of incisions because nobody does that.
Yeah.
Nobody
wants to show you that. I think there's one guy in Argentina.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Dr. Freshy. So he does very good work. Very good work.
He's amazing.
I like his stuff.
And so that's what it's only you and him that I've seen that with. And I mean, I love plastic surgery. I follow a bunch of people and know a bunch of people, but it was only you guys who really focused on this little technique and really looking into the details.
It's the detail. And like even little things like you need to be aware of that. And nobody shows that. Everybody always shows the picture from far away, smiling with makeup on, big flash. Sometimes you can even see a difference. And this is something that irks me. You can see a difference in the background. The white balance is off. So either the picture's overexposed. What are you hiding? Why is the picture always overexposed in the after? Because when you hit too much flash, you're not going to see the scar.
Correct.
And it's a little thing where it's like, I'm not photoshopping. You're not, but you're playing with the lighting.
Yes.
You're playing with the lighting.
And lighting makes such a difference to shadows.
Difference, and there's a little bit more makeup. And you know what? Even if people can't tell, the heart can tell.
Yeah.
And you can see it and you're like, there's something a little bit off. And I can pick it up. And if most people can, they'll see that there's a little bit off there. And when I was looking at it, I said, you know what? I'm gonna go the exact opposite. Everybody's showing like these big, it's like, I'm gonna show them day one up close. This is how clean it can look. It doesn't have to be bloody. It doesn't have to look like things are all bunched up, because most people do get all bunched up and it looks, and they're like, oh, look how nice this looks. Like, no. I'm going to show you how nice it is.
Yeah. So which one, when somebody books with you, what is your favorite procedure? Because
it depends on the person. So it's very
that's
bespoke.
a really good
it's
answer.
Very bespoke. It's very bespoke. Like, for example, like the patient that I was telling you about earlier, the one that we did on Wednesday, I was super excited when she said she wanted to do her lower lids because it was going to take a good result to the next level. And I told her friend, I was like, listen, I'm saving you a lot of money. Like, if you want to do the facelift, I'll do the facelift, but it's not going to take you to that next level. This is going to carry you to that next level. And so it's super bespoke. And I think that's where taste comes in. And, I tell people a lot of times when they often, when we're sitting down and they're interviewing me to be their surgeon or not, and they say, why should I pick you or why should I pick you? And I tell them, well, all my cases are very bespoke. I'm not going to sell you the exact same thing. Not everybody gets the exact same cookie cutter thing. And I'll be honest with you, there's a lot of good surgeons out there. There's plenty of good people down the street. There's plenty of good people in Miami, plenty of good people in New York, plenty of good people in LA. I'm very good. I get a lot of people from everywhere. I was like, but the difference is I have good taste.
Yeah.
And so I'll make sure that it's very bespoke to you. I won't sell you on something that everybody else gets, and everybody between this age group is going to get this exact same thing because that's what everybody's going to get. I'm like, no. You come from this particular part of the world and you have these particular issues, and this is what's going to benefit you the most because you want to stay within like that particular area, or you need this or you need that. So it's super, super bespoke.
I really like that answer because a lot of people don't think like that. And for you to be like, I'm excited to do the best that can be done for you. That is my favorite procedure. Is
it's the best.
So incredible to hear because you're really giving that patient or that client that intimate experience with you, right? And you're really caring about what's best for them versus what's best for your bank account.
Yeah, no, even for example, so facelift yesterday, it was just very straightforward. It was a facelift and a lip lift. She needed some fat grafting, but she's super skinny, so she was not going to do well with fat. We weren't going to be able to get enough volume to make a difference. So I told her, I was like, listen, we're not going to be able to do that, but if I do a little baby lip lift and kind of do this, it'll make things work.
Make things better. And
super pretty. She's in her early 50s, like perfect timing, like not a lot of bone resorption, so it's going to redrape really nicely. Thin skin, a lot of aging, genetics not on her side, so she looks a little bit older than she should for her age. And so, did the neck work, took the glands out, tightened everything up, got really good contour in the neck.
Beautiful.
And I'm just like, okay. I'm like, this is gonna look good, because after you clean that out, you see where her natural anatomy is, and I'm like, okay, she's got good anatomy. This is gonna be good. You pick the left side up, because I always start with the left. Pick that up. Tighten
Why
it
left?
up.
Always.
I'm left-handed.
Okay.
So that's it. So then I pick it up, and then when we finish that left side and everything's all done, and then you're looking at just the one side that's done, and the other side, it's just like, this is going to be so good for her. She's going to love this, you know? And so it's really cool, because, you know, everybody gets excited in the operating room. It's a very nice teamwork environment. And the way that I work is, I always tell my staff, if it doesn't look good, tell me, because I can fix it here.
Right. And just be honest.
Just be honest with me. Like, don't blow smoke up my butt. So there's many times when they'll be like, what do you think about this? I'm like, you're right. Let's do this.
Let's do something different.
Let's just tweak it.
I wanted to get into something that everybody DM'd me about when I told him, hey, I'm going to bring on Miguel, fillers and Botox.
Okay, let's do it.
What's your take on fillers?
I don't think they're that bad. Okay. That's a hot take.
Okay.
Apparently now that's a hot take.
Yeah, it's like,
all of a sudden, I don't get it. So we've been doing fillers for 30 plus years. Billions of people have been injected with fillers over the span of 30 plus years. And now all of a sudden they're bad.
Do you think it's because people have overused and abused fillers and they try to sell them for things like
100%.
Okay.
And that is the truth with anything. Extremes positions on both sides are bad. Only surgery is bad. Only fillers are bad. Only minimally invasive is bad. Everything in moderation, right? You can't just have one hammer. That's the problem. And so when you're trying to do way too many things with one thing, it's going to cause issues. But that's not rocket science.
Right.
And that's not insane, you know. However, are people overdoing it? Yes. Is it really easy to get caught up in the instant gratification of a little bit of filler? Of course. Do you need someone to guide you and then kind of pull you back and hold you to reality? Of course. Are most people doing that? No. Most people want to make money. And so, yeah, you get that like dirty little feeling of like, oh, if I just go to this med spa and they're selling me 8 syringes,
I'll just take it.
I'll just take it because that's what they're supposed to do. And they tell me that this is good. And then you go to the surgeon and the surgeon is like, oh,
what the hell do you do?
Filler's the worst. You should never do filler. And like, never? Really? Because you just told me I need volume and you can do fat grafting. But you're not going to do a lot of fat grafting. You're just going to do a little bit. So
what am I going to do?
So what's the difference between a little bit? And then you do the fat grafting and then you tell me like, oh, you're still going to need a little bit of filler to fit. But I thought you just told me that the filler was bad. And so you need to be aware that one, there's a right answer is in moderation. 2, different fillers do different things. And that's also super important because there are biostimulators, which are very different than your traditional HA fillers or your calcium hydroxyapatite fillers. And those are the main ones that we have in the United States. In Europe, there's other ones that are readily available. They're mostly HAs, different consistency and thickness. It's a lot more stringent to pass that stuff here in the US, which I think is good because it makes it a little bit easier for the consumer. And I think it makes it less incentive driven for the practitioner. So I find that my overseas patients often get pushed into the filler a little bit more than over here.
Over here.
Well, but here they'll be a little bit more aggressive, the practitioners, just because people want that look.
Yeah.
So overseas, my Europe, Middle East patients, it's a little bit more classy, subtle. So they're doing.
I mean, everything in Europe is a little subtle.
It's a little more subtle. Yeah, it's a little. Yeah, it's a little more refined.
They have better taste.
Yeah, it's a little more refined. So they're doing a little bit of filler, but they're just doing it more continuously and more different types of fillers. So they're doing a lot of mixy matchy. Whereas here, people are trying to achieve surgical results with fillers.
Through fillers, and that you shouldn't be doing.
That you shouldn't be doing.
So I, got a lot of filler back in the day because I have a really thin face and stuff, and my lymphatic system got totally fucked under my eyes, like really badly. And so now, I mean, I personally have kind of stepped away from that, said like, I don't want any more puffiness. I'm just going to let this ride out. And personally, I'm somebody who's only doing filler in my lips now. I don't want to tamper, but I personally had that, I went to a couple people, they thought they knew what they were doing. They over injected me, couldn't really dissolve it. And then I was freaking stuck with it.
Because you have to remember too, that the practitioner is number one into looking at the micro and forgetting the macro. And this harps back to even what I was talking about in surgery, where that's why I like about the team aspect of it. And that's why I like to have the team involved. If you are focused on, man, my under eyes are really bad. Okay. To pick up the under eyes, you build the cheek. Okay, you build the cheek, you build the under eyes. Okay, now I got to build the temples because otherwise now you're too hollow above.
Yeah.
And your submalar and subzygomatic space is also hollow. So now you got to build that too. Guess what's happening? You're pretty quickly growing laterally and anteriorly with HA. Okay, that looks really strange. So now I have to build down here. So pretty soon you're just kind of like chasing it in different directions. When in reality, if you just took a look at the macro and you said, okay, I see the under eyes. We need to build a little bit of volume, but we'll just do a tiny little bit and fix that and then address a little temple. It's not going to...
You'll be good to go.
You'll be good. It'll be a huge difference and it'll look nice.
What are some of the places you think fillers work best? Because
temples.
Okay. Temples,
Temples. Oh, temples. And people don't talk about the temple nearly enough.
Yeah.
You know, we always talk about lips, cheeks, jawline. Those are always cool, buzzy.
But this is where aging really...
Make for great pictures,
Yeah.
you know, great before and afters with all those. But the temple is so nice because you have to remember that the transition point is really from the brow, along the temple, cheek, and then down into the jawline. So if you have like a nice little heart shape to that, that's what looks really beautiful.
Right.
And oftentimes when patients have a really thin skin, the temple starts to sink in very quickly.
Right.
You just add a little bit through that,
It makes all the difference.
all the difference in the world. And you didn't add filler anywhere else. It was really, really pretty.
And talking about recovery, right? You're into health and wellness. You don't even drink coffee.
Nope.
You eat a lot of protein. We know this. What are some of the hacks that...
Hyperbaric oxygen, red light therapy.
Okay, red light. I love that you said red light. And why red light therapy?
Brings oxygen, stimulates mitochondrial production of protein. Like it basically is like if you have a volume switch when you're healing and you're at a 6, it just cranks it up to like an 8 or a 9.
Can you do red light therapy though after fat grafting, or is it going to melt the fat?
No, you can do it.
Oh,
you can do
really?
it. Yeah, you can do it. You can do it because it'll stimulate the blood flow to that
amazing.
area. So you'll be fine, and it's very superficial, so it won't be affecting anything too deep. Now, what you can't do with fat grafting is any sort of laser for bruising or any sort of laser for fine blood vessels, and you can't do that for about a month. But if you zap it with the lasers, like what we had talked about, it'll disrupt it because it's going to go after the blood vessels, and we don't want to go after blood vessels.
So when somebody does fat grafting, then I want to touch upon this. What is their recovery protocol to retain as much fat as possible?
All the literature that we have for fat retention is for the Brazilian butt lift.
Yes.
So
we don't have anything for the face.
not much for face, but the fat that is, if you can get stuff to survive for Brazilian butt lift, you'll be more than fine with face, following the same protocols. And it's very easy. It's actually not very difficult. Increase caloric intake by about 10%, 10 to 15%.
Okay.
For 2 weeks.
Okay.
Sounds like a lot. Don't stress out. I said caloric intake, 10 to 15%. So if you have a 2,000 calorie diet, it's 200 calories. That's like a smoothie.
And a lot more fat, eating a lot more healthy fats.
Just healthy fats. Healthy fats, protein. So you're going to take what you normally would do for your healing to improve your healing. So good protein, healthy fats, oils, like all the natural stuff, all the good stuff. And then throw in a smoothie or a power bar in there.
Yeah.
That's all it is. Because with fat grafting, the most important thing is when you're healing, regardless of what you do, twist your ankle, have elective cosmetic surgery, get in a car crash. Doesn't matter. Along all those, your body's going to go into a catabolic state when it's trying to heal itself.
Right.
Why? Because it's a factory and it's going to take as much calorie as it can or as much fuel as it can to try and heal itself. If you do not give it enough fuel, what does it do? It turns to itself to find fuel.
Right.
Where does it find that fuel? In
your
fat. So we do not want your body to go from a catabolic state into a ketotic state. Super important. So that's why you want to kind of force yourself for those first 2 weeks to eat what you normally would, even if you don't feel like it. It'll actually speed up your healing, number one. And number two, it'll maintain as much of that fat. After 2 weeks, you're good. You can go back to exercise and you can do all that. You may not feel like it.
Right.
But from a data-driven standpoint,
You're
totally
fine.
Go.
I read somewhere, and I don't know if this is true or not, it takes up to 6, because you know when you put fat in, there's a percentage loss, right? Mm-hmm. So I read somewhere that it takes up to 6 months to see how much fat you're actually left with.
It'll fluctuate. It'll fluctuate.
Really?
So within 2 weeks, you know what's there.
Oh.
Some of that may necrose. So some of that may die. You may get a couple little cysts inside, et cetera. It happens. It's rare, but it does happen. But that fat has memory. And so interesting, it's one of the cool things about fat, that wherever you take it from, that's how it's going to respond. So the fat that's highest in what we call adipose-derived regenerative cells, some people call them stem cells. It's misnomer, but easiest thing to remember. Lateral thigh, inner thigh, tummy, flank. When you take that fat, if you put it in your face, and then let's say you were to gain 30 pounds for whatever reason, and you always gain them in your thighs, you're also going to gain it in your face.
In your face, because it's the fat cell that's traveling there.
The fat cell has traveled there. So it has the same memory. Now, as it's adapting to the tissue around it, it's going to fluctuate. And what you're seeing is that if you go out and go to Coyo and get a bunch of tacos, get super salty, get really puff, your face is going to get puffy.
Yeah.
Then the next day, it's going to go down. You're going to feel flat like a pancake. So it varies with you. And in that initial process, the fat cell's kind of in shock. So it's going to overreact on both extremes. And it's a little bit of a roller coaster. It gets better, goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down, goes up, goes down, and stabilizes at about the 6-month mark. Interestingly enough, as it stabilizes, what you're seeing is an improvement in the quality of the skin as well.
Right.
Why? Because as that fat is harvesting, kind of getting itself joined to all the tissue together, it's sending all of the signals to the tissue around it for growth. So all these natural growth factors are being secreted and sent, and that new signaling goes not just to the fat and the tissue below it, but also to the tissue above it. So the biggest compliment that people get from fat grafting is not the volume, is your skin. Yeah. Like, oh, your skin looks so good.
Yeah.
Like, you look so fresh. Like, what happened? And it's that byproduct of the fat transfer.
I could talk to you all day. There's so much great
It's cool
information and stuff.
Yeah, it's cool stuff.
I need to get you back on for like another episode just to go into things further.
Yeah, once people figure out what it is that they liked, and then we can go from there.
So I have a closing tradition on the podcast that I started, and I ask everyone the same question. And the question is, what is a one lesson or learning to date that has been most impactful and has carried you throughout your journey?
Keep going. When you think it's hardest, you're on the right path.
That's amazing. There are days that you want to quit, but that's the days that you keep pursuing it.
That's when something good's about to happen.
Yeah.
When it feels like it's the hardest and you're not sure, but something inside you tells you, no, this is what we do it. Just keep going. That's
Perseverance.
That's
resilience.
That's where the magic happens.
That's such a good way to end this episode. Thank you so much, Miguel, for doing this.
Of course,
I
my
am so
pleasure.
excited you came on the podcast. I've been following you for a while. We've been going back and forth, and
For a while.
almost
it's
like
been
a
minute.
year and a half, 2 years. Yeah. So
Yeah, it's been a minute.
I've been a fan for a while, and I was really grateful that we could find this time together. So thank you.
Perfect. My pleasure.